Good morning. On behalf of the Nathan E. Banks Foundation and Full Circle Consulting Systems, Inc., we would like to welcome you to an incredible time in history and applaud all of you for having the vision, courage, and interest to create a preferred future for the nation of Jamaica by simply being here today. As we prepare to position our thinking and our minds around this conversation, I would like to take this moment to thank Mrs. Christine Staple E. Banks, along with the Nathan E. Banks Foundation Governing Board, for their vision, their inspiration, expertise, and willingness to do exactly what it takes to create sustainable change in Jamaica. It is with deep reverence that I acknowledge the Honorable Reverend Joseph Faulkner for his commitment and his unwavering support for more than a decade for the work of the Nathan E. Banks Foundation. To the child advocates in the room, Diane Gordon Harrison of Jamaica Children's Advocate and Mrs. Rosalie Gage Gray, Executive Director of Child Development Agency, we celebrate you, we acknowledge you, and we thank you. As we continue to think about all the people that have gathered to create this experience possible, we would be remiss not to thank Mrs. Christine Hendricks, Executive Director of Jamaica Council for Children with Disabilities, a powerhouse in her own right, whom I've had the great fortune to share the stage with many times before to bring light and shine a bright spot on the power and the importance of inclusion, particularly for persons with disabilities, and helping people to understand that it's not just a privilege to include people with disabilities, but it's a fundamental human right. So I'm so thankful that you are here once again to share your voice and bring your presence to such a critical conversation. To Dr. David McBean, President of Supreme Ventures Foundation, we thank you for being a visionary and innovator of breakthrough thinking and business models and taking advances and opportunities within the business sector to create human conditions that create far greater opportunities for people that may not have received those types of opportunities. Members of media, thank you for your presence and knowing the power of mass media and supporting and strengthening messages of change. We also want to acknowledge other specially invited guests for ushering a new revelation for children's rights and the rights of children with disabilities. To the children, we share a warm and special greeting to each and every one of you. For if it weren't for you, this mission could not be possible. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we would like to welcome you to a new vision for the future. This is such an exciting time to be part of the Jamaica landscape and to be part of the economic force, whether it's the educational arena or the business arena, because right now we are talking about creating the workforce and the power of possibility for people with disabilities. The Disability Act in Jamaica was recently signed into law and provides provisions for safeguarding the rights of people with disabilities. Undoubtedly, it's an exciting body of legislation that prohibits discrimination against persons with disabilities. The reason why this is so incredibly important is because in 1990, the United States of America embarked upon a similar journey, which ratified into law our Disabilities Act. As we enter our 25th anniversary of the Disability Act, we enter into a new understanding, and we have created new ways of being as a nation that has radically changed our language, our communication, our economic, our social, legal, and political frameworks when referencing including persons with disabilities. And it's with profound honor, humility, and pleasure that I get the opportunity to share with you what we have learned as a nation. First and foremost, we have come to understand that disability is a multidimensional word and that there is no universally accepted definition of disability. What is universally accepted and understood is that the language has power and so does people's attitudes. Kathy Snow, an activist and researcher in the United States, shares that the first way to devalue someone is through language. Language, we know, is so incredibly important and so powerful. And by using words or labels to identify a person or a group as less than or the others, the people that are not like us and so forth, it can change the way that we see a person. It can ultimately change the way a person sees him or herself. What we have come to understand as a nation is that people are people. Regardless of ability, what separates people from people are the categories, and we tend to use those categories to make sense of things that we simply don't understand. Our mental models are what we use to understand and bring to life vision, right? And a lot of times, our mental models could either be powerful contributors or inhibitors to success. And we have learned that firsthand as a nation, that our mental models, how we see people, how we engage people, and the language that we use can have powerful indicators about indicators of success and how well people fare and the level of engagement people are actually having with each other, just by the mere fact of the words that we use. Language, again, is incredibly powerful, and it has radically shaped how we engage, how we describe, and how we empower people with disabilities. What's really fascinating about the United States, and I'm not sure how many of you actually know this, but 1 in 5 Americans actually have a disability. It's also the most inclusive and most diverse group of all ages, genders, religions, ethnicities, sexual orientations, social economic factors. When you think about disabilities, it is the minority group, yet one of the largest groups when we start talking about categories of difference. Contrary to the conventional wisdom, individuals with disabilities are not people who suffer from the tragedies of birth defects, paraplegic heroes who struggle to become normal again, victims who fight to overcome their challenges, nor are they persons that have been referred to as retarded, autistic, blind, deaf, learning disabled. We can go on and on and on. What we have found is that first and foremost, people with disabilities are simply people. They are people, they are moms, they're dads, they're sons, they're daughters, they're employees, they're employers, they're friends, they're neighbors, they're students, they're teachers, they're scientists, they're reporters, they're doctors, they're actors, there's presidents. There's so much more when you think about who people are, and just because they have a disability is not the defining factor of who they are. People with disabilities are people first, and people with disabilities are the largest minority group that any person can join at any time. And what I mean by that is none of us are prevented or not given, not presented with the situation, if you will, to experience disability. And when we think about it, disability can happen at any moment and any time to any one of us. It can happen at birth, it can happen later, it can happen through an accident, through illness, or even the aging process. So in essence, when we're talking about disabilities, it's not someone else's issue. It affects all of us at one point or another. One of our primary goals with the Disability Act in the United States was to advance employment opportunities for individuals with significant disabilities. And some of the things that we found to be incredibly important is educating both the private sector and the public sector employers about accommodating people with disabilities in the workplace and the power and the benefits of doing so. By supporting state governments and joining with business partners to develop blueprints to promote the hiring and the retention of individuals with disabilities in integrated employment settings, both privately and publicly, has made a significant difference. Another part of our agenda was establishing public and private partnerships to build out those blueprints and increase employment of individuals with disabilities. These initiatives have led to new understandings and a demystification of myths about disabilities. The most powerful learning episode in the United States around inclusion has been the mere fact that inclusion is more than a philosophy, that it must be an actual practice. And here are a few suggestions to think about as we think about the notion of practicing inclusive efforts, and what does that look like in breakthrough business models. One thing that I would like to share up front is accessing a broader talent pool by hiring people with disabilities brings a diverse range of skills and abilities and new and valuable perspectives to the workplace that may not have existed prior to considering the power and importance of including people with disabilities. Recruiting and retaining people with disabilities is one approach to encounter the effects of the aging and shrinking workforce. There is a dynamic that is happening within the workforce where we're having more people that are starting to move to a retirement phase, and there's been a gap in the employment experience. What we have found is actually recruiting and retaining people with disabilities can help actually shrink that gap. Evidence-based literature indicates businesses that hire individuals with disabilities report reduced employee turnover. And that's a powerful point, that the employee turnover rate is actually reduced. Increased employee loyalty is actually up. Increased morale and productivity of other employees actually go up as a result of being inclusive of people with disabilities. People with disabilities do not cost more than employees without disabilities. And this is a question that's often presented. There are tons of studies overseas that have found that workers with a disability are no more likely to be injured at work than other employees without disabilities. And the differences in performance and productivity, there hasn't been great variance with that. There seems to be an equalized experience in that as well. It was also identified through the research that employees with disabilities actually have fewer scheduled absences than employees with disability, as well as increased tenure. So let me say that one more time. It was also identified that employees with disability actually have fewer scheduled absences than employees without disabilities. On average, employing people with disability does not cost any more than employing people without disabilities. And these are just a few things that we have found through our research and practice since we enacted this law over 25 years ago. The other thing that I would point out in demystifying myths about people with disabilities is that people with disabilities will not minimize work innovation. In fact, advancements in technology are making it possible for more people with disabilities to participate in all types of employment settings. For example, accommodations that once upon a time were considered to be extraordinary are actually ordinary and not as expensive as before, because we now have mobile apps for smartphones and tablet computers that can work as alternative devices and accommodations for people with disabilities. Hiring people with disabilities will safeguard the laws and outline the key components of the Disabilities Act of 2014. And what I mean by that is, when you hire people with disabilities, you are exercising the spirit of the law. You limit the risk of lawsuits, which could do immeasurable harm to your business in the form of financial loss as well as damage to your reputation. Hiring people with disabilities can offer a number of important financial, legal, public relations, productivity advantages for a business. The mere fact that customers with disabilities and their families and their friends and their associates represent an untapped dollar market segment that is worth tapping into. There is actual opportunities to explore new consumer resources and promote higher business revenues by tapping into this market that hasn't really been tapped into in the past. They, like other market segments, purchase products and services from companies that best meet their needs. And the question is, how come we haven't tapped into that market in a more action-oriented and more intentional way? Really, what I'm talking about today is the opportunity to take a real look at your company or your organization and ask yourself, where can I begin to inspire real change in supporting the rights and employment of persons with disabilities? It might be in customer service, it can be in hospitality, it could be in administration, it could be in food service, it could be the person at the box office at the movie theater that actually takes the tickets from the customers as they come into the movie theater. There's so many diverse and awesome ways to look at inclusion opportunities for persons with disabilities. One of the things that we consider really powerful forces in strengthening our charge to do this effectively is learning as much as we possibly can about disabilities, providing disability awareness and sensitivity trainings within our employment agencies, establishing an employment plan. What does that actually look like? What does that sound like? What does that feel like for the organization, as well as the people that are being invited in through employment from the organization? The other thing to think about is seeking resources from experienced organizations, and working with persons of disabilities. And the other piece that is incredibly profound is having a vision, actually projecting in your mind and having a shared joint vision of what this could look like, and including people with disabilities. There's so much that we can talk about, and I could go on for days and days and days because this is a passion point of mine. And for the last 25 years, it has really motivated and geared my work in creating just optimal opportunities and advancements economically, socially, community-wise, educationally-wise. And as you could probably tell, I get really excited about talking about this because the opportunities are endless. In closing, I will share this. What brings me the greatest hope for inclusion in Jamaica is that I know firsthand from working in the country for over 10 years that you are a people that is resourceful, you are a people that's resilient, you are a people that has remarkable determination. And with that only comes greatness. People often ask, Cinta, where do you begin in this whole inclusion effort? And my comment over the past 25 years has always remained the same. It doesn't matter where you begin, just begin. I've come to understand that ordinary steps can lead to extraordinary outcomes. I encourage you to use the information that you've learned today, the voices from the children, the voices from the community, the people who have actually walked this journey from personal experience, and the people who have created monumental dedication and advances in change. I ask you to use that information to be your guideposts and your wisdom to remember that each and every day that all individuals are born with possibilities. I thank you for your time. I thank you for your expertise. I thank you for your vision. I thank you for your commitment. And I thank you for the power that lies ahead in creating substantial, incredible changes on behalf of children and persons with disabilities. I encourage you to venture forward, try new landscapes, and see what possibilities can bring. Thank you.